Hello everyone, I'm Left, and for today's video, I'm going to talk about, I get a lot of questions that are really vague. Stuff like, how do I become good? Or, I want to reach VG, how do I do this? There are so many different answers to these questions, and they're all a part of the big answer, or they're all a part of the big question about how do you get to VG. Well, I'm only going to answer one part of this question today, and that is personal hero play. Personal hero play has nothing to do with talent. A personal favorite quote of mine goes like this: "Excellence is not a gift, but a habit. We are what we repeatedly do." I've achieved peak personal play on two heroes in Vainglory, Crystal Kestrel and what you see here, Weapon Glaive. But what is peak personal play? It's a few things. First, it has to do with perfect mechanics. Now, before you go and one-trick a certain hero to get perfect mechanics with them, you'll have to master a few general things first in Vainglory, which is no canceling auto attacks. Canceling auto attacks is when you try to stutter step but fail and your auto attack doesn't actually happen. So, if you're not very good at stutter stepping, even trying to stutter step can be a double or nothing. It can be kind of a double or nothing bet because you'll either do it correctly and get 2 quick attacks, or you'll do it wrong and get 0 attacks. So, not canceling your autos is something you will really need to master before you move up the ranks in Vainglory. Not missing abilities is another obvious one, especially if you're playing a mage like Celeste or Scarf. Energy management is another good one, especially on weapon power heroes. Things like Ringo and Gwen and Weapon Kestrel and Weapon Glaive. Energy management is a big one, especially if you're not using a build that has Spell Sword in it. Lastly, mastery of skill combos for said hero. Every hero has little quirks and little just interesting things that you can pull off using their kit that they're unique to that hero. And for Glaive, that would be the Afterburn Stroke move, where you'll probably see it at least once in this video. I don't know how I'm going to edit it yet, I'm just talking right now. But what happens is you use Afterburn. As soon as you activate the punt by tapping on the enemy hero, you also hit Twisted Stroke. So you get the bonus damage from the Afterburn punt with the stun and the instant crit and the bonus crystal damage of the Twisted Stroke at the same time. There's a point in this video where I one-shot kill an enemy Samuel with it, and for Glaive at least, it's one of the hardest combos in the game to pull off, but every hero has little quirky skill combos like this. Like, some of them are simple, like for Ozo. Something that I could tell you for Ozo would be, make sure you're basic attacking between each activation of 3-Ring Circus, because it adds free bonus damage to the 3-Ring Circus. So yeah, every hero has little things like this. Another one, maybe for Kestrel, would be, it's not so much like a hard skill combo, but if you're playing Crystal Kestrel, even if you're just free in the backline and you're just raining down arrows, place a couple active camos under your feet, especially if you have a Clockwork, just in case. Because on the off chance that somebody does get close to you, then you're not dead, because you have 2 active camos under your feet. Crystal Kestrel is like the epitome of better safe than sorry. But I'm going on a tangent now. The next section is called Building Knowledge. This is things like, when should I start building Tension Bow on Glaive, and when should I go straight for Sorrowblade? The answer to this would be, you would go Tension Bow when the enemies have a lot of late scaling heroes that can get their lanes shoved in very quickly by aggressive early heroes. When would I sell off an item for a Bonesaw? Lots of armor on the enemy team. This one seems very easy, but for some reason a lot of people don't understand it. When should I prioritize defense over damage? This would be when you realize that your team is dealing more damage than you are, and the enemy comp does not let you be as successful as you want to. Maybe they have way too much crowd control, and you can't even think about getting in there to deal a lot of damage. Well, then you would start prioritizing defense over damage, and you would basically become an Afterburn setter upper rather than a carry. Your move in fights is to get that perfect Afterburn so that your Celeste or Scarf can set up a ton of damage. The next section is knowing your limits. So this one's a big one, and it encompasses a lot of things. Knowing my limits is how I went 26-0 in this Devstream match before being exploded by Xeno's CP Baron, of course. Knowing your limits includes this: how much damage do I really do in fights? Lots of new players misjudge the damage that they can do, and that is why they die. Lots of tier 6, 7, and 8 players misjudge the damage that they do, and that's why they die. You gotta know, and knowing how much damage you do depends on a couple of other things. Are they building defense against me, or are they not? So this requires you to have an active knowledge of what the enemy items and what the enemy builds are, and what skills they're maxing. Heroes with high defense that want to take you out are probably going to be building armor if you're going weapon glaive. You need to know who has lots of armor and who doesn't have lots of armor, and you need to know this in the middle of the game so you know who to target in fights. As we got later and later into the Devstream game, I looked at the builds and I was like, okay, so everybody has either a Metal Jackal or an Atlas Pauldron except for Xenotech on the Baron. So then now I need to go for him. Then you need to have an active knowledge of where the enemies are on the map. If you're playing lane, then you'll know when is your opponent laner in the lane, when is he not in the lane. You can communicate this to your team, especially if you're in Discord comms. You will need to know, you'll need to at least have some idea of when heroes are coming up the river or down the river to kill you, whether you're in mid lane or in top lane or bot lane, and in jungle, it really matters in jungle. You gotta know what's their rotation pattern, is their weapon buff going to be up before they can get back to it, because then you can steal it. Same thing with the crystal buff, same thing for any camp back there. Their gold treant, their double camps, yeah. So next, you need to know the enemy item spikes. If you're playing against, say, a CP Baron in top lane and you're trying to lane glaive, you need to push him out before he gets the Shatterglass and the Clockwork. Some Barons are going for Spellfire nowadays, but I digress. Before he gets the first tier 3 crystal item and the Clockwork, you need to make sure he does not get those items, because then you probably won't be able to farm safely anymore, and you may not even be able to 1v1 him down. You also need to have an intimate knowledge of how your hero interacts with the enemy heroes. This comes down to, who can I 1v1? Who can 1v1 me? Which heroes can I 2v1 after I buy this item? So, a good example of this is Kroll. You do not 1v1 Kroll, unless you are Kroll, you're ahead in items. Next, should I stand and fight? How much damage can I take before I need to flask? You need to know how much damage the enemy is going to do to you in a fight, because if you don't, you can get caught off guard and die without using your flask. If you flask at the perfect time, you can pretty much win every fight, even if the enemies have flask. Lastly, this one is probably the most important one, and it's something that I am still trying to get some of my players on Nova to understand. Does the enemy have flask? This is very, very, very important. I know flask was nerfed a little bit, but it still is kind of an extra life. It's 120 second cooldown, 2 minutes. Pulling out the enemy flask is like getting half of a kill at this point. Before flask was nerfed, it was like getting an entire kill. But I digress. This one is so important. Know that the enemy has flask. If you do not have flask and you suspect that they might, you do not go in. You can't go in unless they're on like 2 HP and you think you can burst them before they use the flask. So yeah, all of these things, they need to be traveling through your head during the game. Every single game you play. If you can internalize these things and be able to think about them, you'll be able to achieve peak personal play on whatever hero you like. You can one trick, it doesn't matter. Or you can play a few heroes and try to get peak personal play on all of them. If you can internalize these things and be actively thinking through them in the game, you will get better and eventually you will reach Fiji. So thanks for watching, guys. That's going to be it. I'll see you all next week. And remember to check out my Twitch channel too, twitch.tv/LeftSpectorsVG. I'm a partner now. I'm going to have emotes soon, so come follow or subscribe to me if you want to.